The age-old question. Why is Peter Pan's flight always so crowded?
Welcome, foolish mortals.
All personnel.
We all wonder this every time we want to ride this attraction, but if you think about it, there are lots of reasons for this. First of all, let's consider that this ride has a pretty low ride capacity compared to other rides in the park. Take a look at the Haunted Mansion. The mansion's ride capacity per hour is of 2,400 guests, while Peter Pan's flight varies between 800 and 1,000 guests. But if this was the only reason for the crowds, then Mr. Toad's Wild Ride or Snow White's Scary Adventures would have the same problem. They both have similar ride capacities in slow loading areas. So why don't they have this problem? Well, every Fantasyland ride is special.
Fantasyland, the happiest kingdom of them all.
They are full of nostalgia because they represent some of our favorite Disney movies, and they're the original rides that Walt envisioned. But while Snow White, Mr. Toad, Alice in Wonderland, or Pinocchio are great at doing this, they do it with the traditional limitations of a dark ride. They have a traditional car that takes us through many of the film's scenes, following a single rail on the floor. They have some twists and turns and noises and lights, and they are designed to show us some of the negative aspects of the story. We have a dark and scary forest in The Wicked Witch with the apple in Snow White. We have Stromboli and the coachman trying to take us to the salt mines in Pinocchio, getting lost in the forest and almost being beheaded by the Queen of Hearts in Alice in Wonderland, and who can forget hell in Mr. Toad's Wild Ride? Peter Pan's flight is completely different. From the moment you get in the ship and it takes you flying across London, you can feel the difference. Peter Pan's flight is full of open spaces, and the floating motion has always helped it to stand out in the comparison to the other Fantasyland rides. The ride is also the most positive of all the other dark rides. It's full of fantasy and never makes us feel scared or threatened like its neighbors. We might wonder why this attraction was made so different from all the other dark rides in Fantasyland, and the answer probably lies in the love and special relationship that Walt had with this story.
If you're familiar with the story of Peter Pan, you know that a little sprinkling of Tinkerbell's fairy dust can make you fly. Tink, wait a minute. Haven't you forgotten something? Aren't you going to take the audience along?
It was 1913, and a small touring company bought a play called Peter Pan to Marceline, Missouri. A small boy watched the play and fell in love with this epic story. And how could he not, if it was the perfect combination of fantasy and adventure? This little boy was Walt, and since that moment, he never forgot Peter Pan. In 1924, Walt saw a silent version of the story. The film contained many innovations and state-of-the-art special effects, which we all know Walt was a fan of, so the love for the boy who never grew up became larger. And it was in the 1930s when Walt started to come up with the idea to make a Peter Pan movie. He knew that making an animated movie would be better because you could get away with lots of things and effects that were not possible in live-action versions of the story. So, he created a masterpiece that became one of the most beloved Disney films of all Disney fans. So obviously, Peter Pan had a sure place in Disneyland when Walt started to imagine Fantasyland. But creating Fantasyland dark rides was no easy task for the Imagineers. They had to design and create them with almost impossible deadlines. Some of the Imagineers that were tasked to do this were Herb Ryman, Marvin Davis, Bob Matley, Claude Coates, and Ken Anderson, among many others. And that's not all. Other Fantasyland rides were easier to achieve in a much quicker way. Many of the dark scenes are images painted directly on plywood flats that move as soon as the carts get there. But not on Peter Pan's flight. Why? Well, because guests were to fly above and past such large visual elements as Skull Rock or Neverland Island. and it was necessary to present them in 3 dimensions instead of the 2 dimensions that the plywood could give. So, in March of 1955, only 4 months before Disneyland's opening, Disney artists Ken Anderson and Claude Coates were working day and night to achieve an attraction that would exceed expectations. There wasn't a lot of preliminary planning like with other rides, where they would have each scene exactly planned out the way it was supposed to be. There wasn't enough time for that. Both Claude Coates and Ken Anderson had worked in the feature film in color styling and layout, so they had a pretty good idea of what was needed just for the look, story, and key scenes. They knew the theme and the space they had, and so they just started working on it. Models of various scenes for the ride had been done in advance, but most of the scene detailing took place on site. Another interesting thing about the ride was that at the beginning it was made so that guests could look at the story from Peter Pan's point of view. So Imagineers didn't add a Peter Pan animatronic to the ride. But this became a problem because many of the guests didn't understand this concept. So they left the ride wondering why Peter Pan was not in it. As for the rails, the earliest vehicle drive mechanisms and the track system were obtained from the Cleveland Tram Rail Company, which was known for its over-here conveyor systems. Bob Gurr stated that the original track system was extremely loud and full of problems, which resulted in regular redesigning and maintenance. It was also a bit risky because the ships could be made to swing sideways, an activity which became popular among young riders. This made the attraction stop because the ship could not continue along the track. So, in 1960, the attraction was reworked and improved, and many of the track system problems were resolved. Also in 1960, the Chicken of the Sea dropped its sponsorship, so the Chicken of the Sea pirate ship and restaurant became Captain Hook's Galley. This was a perfect opportunity for this area to become completely Peter Pan themed. So with this change came the Skull Rock Lagoon that served as a perfect scenic background and seating area for patrons of the restaurants. Here kids were often chased by Captain Hook behind the waterfalls and through the small caves for some pretty cool photo ops. Skull Rock looked especially cool at night, with all the lighting of the area and its green eyes turned on. 10 years later, while Peter Pan's flight continued being a great attraction in Disneyland, a new Magic Kingdom was built. In February 1971, Imagineers Bill Martin and Bill Justice finished drawings of Walt Disney World's version of Peter Pan's flight, filled with new and more exciting additions. The format remained basically the same as Disneyland's, but the Walt Disney World's Peter Pan Dark Ride had many of the newest audio animatronic figures, with lots of animation and sound effects. In addition to the crocodile, Smee, and Hook, the newer version featured Indians, Lost Boys, and pirates. Also, Imagineers didn't make the same mistake of having guests play the role of Peter Pan. Scenes like Wendy reading to the boys in a nursery and Captain Hook's 48-foot pirate ship, where a climactic duel between Captain Hook and Peter Pan takes place, were also added to this new attraction. But now let's go back to Disneyland. It was 1983, and Imagineers knew that Fantasyland needed a renovation. The land was never quite what Walt Disney wanted it to be. Fantasyland was built with limited time and money, and with the idea that it would later be updated. And the time had come. There were many renovations made. They changed the land's look from a Renaissance carnival motif where the rides had a medieval traveling tournament tent to look a fantasy mock-up of a Bavarian village. King Arthur's Carousel was moved back quite a distance in order to open the funnel of traffic coming from and going to the castle. Pinocchio's Daring Journey opened up because, as we've said before, it wasn't one of Disneyland's opening attractions. Dumbo Flying Elephants was renamed to Dumbo the Flying Elephant to help preserve the fact that there's only one Dumbo, and it was moved from its original place that was where the outdoor patio of the Village House restaurant is today. Where was it moved, you might ask? To where Captain Hook's Galley and Skull Rock used to be. And sadly, we lost both of them in the process. The original intent was to move the pirate ship near the Storybook Land entrance and recreate Skull Cove, but when the machines tried to pick up the ship, it simply collapsed. This was because the ship was built quickly in 1954 to 55, and not designed to be moved. There was no money in the budget to rebuild her, so she was taken apart instead. Thankfully, many of the props from the ships found their way to the new and improved Peter Pan's flight. What changes were made apart from changing the ride facade from the tournament tent style to a London-inspired exterior with a large clock tower? Well, for starters, Peter Pan was finally added to the ride as an animatronic. Scenes from the Florida rides were added to it, including the pirate ship deck where Peter and Hook duel. The scenes are not identical, but they're very similar. Peter Pan remained a fan favorite, and so, in 2015, Imagineers decided to create a whole new interactive queue, and it's amazing. Taking the place of the former bathrooms in Fantasyland, the new Peter Pan's flight queue features the Darlings Nursery, with the beds of John, Wendy, and Michael, as well as a few of Peter Pan's own touches. Walking by an interactive wall, you can put your hand up so a butterfly can land on your finger, or you can even ring the bells, and sometimes you can wear the characters' costumes. The coolest part is when a lantern holding Tinkerbell appears and you have to let her out. She then goes flying around the room, making props come alive, moving, shaking, and lighting up as she passes through. Also, this was a year when Disneyland turned 60, and they decided to bring new magic to 3 classic attractions: the Matterhorn bobsleds, the Haunted Mansion, and of course, Peter Pan's flight. So on February 2nd, 2015, the attraction closed for refurbishment, and it was originally scheduled to reopen on May 21st, 2015, but was later pushed back to July 1st, 2015. With this renovation came new animatronics of Wendy, John, and Michael flying above John's bed in the nursery, where previously we had seen John and Michael sitting in John's bed, and Wendy sitting on a chair next to them. And also, the new special effects were added to the London and Neverland scenes. We can find Peter Pan's flight in Disneyland, Walt Disney World, Tokyo Disneyland, Disneyland Paris, and the newest edition, Shanghai Disneyland. And even though every version of the ride is great, this last one is amazing. With all the new technology available in the new park, Imagineers could recreate the ride that was imagined in the first place and make it even better. Just take a look at some of the scenes. And to finish up, we wanted to share with you 5 facts you need to know about Peter Pan's flight. There's a very special character visiting Neverland in Walt Disney World's Peter Pan's flight. Take a close look at the Mermaid Lagoon, and you can see that Ariel is hanging out with some mermaid friends. Legend has it that after The Little Mermaid hit theaters, people started noticing that one of the mermaids looked a little like Ariel, so that started asking cast members if it was actually her. Obviously, this couldn't be since the ride had this scene since it was opened in 1971, and the movie didn't come out until 1989. But after the attraction went down for refurb, Imagineers painted the mermaid's hair red and sculpted her a brand new seashell-shaped bra. With those 2 quick changes, she officially became Ariel. As you fly over the nursery scene, look carefully at the blocks on the ground. Some of the blocks with the letters and numbers in it are the correct order that spell out something. Can you see what it says? The blocks spell the word Disney. They also spell Peter Pan. The ride uses forced perspectives to make you feel higher than you are. At highest, you are only about 17 feet off the ground while flying through the attraction, though the forced perspective used on the effects below you can make you feel much higher. This is particularly true in the scenes when you are flying over London and first entering Neverland, as the size of the models below imply that you're soaring to a much taller height. The calendar on the wall in the bedroom in the interactive queue area marks the date of December 27, 1904. This is the year that James Barrie wrote the novel Peter Pan, and the date, December 27th, is when the play opened at the Duke of York's Theatre in London. There are a few hidden Mickeys inside Peter Pan's flight, but one of the coolest ones is in the Big Ben clock tower. Mickey's silhouette can be seen on the back side of the tower when we're leaving the area, so be sure to look back at Big Ben while passing it. So that is the story of Peter Pan's flight. We would like to thank all our patrons and let everyone know we've upgraded our patron rewards, so check them out. We also opened up a new store, and here's this week's special shirt. We're also doing a t-shirt giveaway this week, so leave a comment below with the hashtag FastpassFacts giveaway for a chance to win it. We'll announce the winner in next week's video. My name's Will, and I'm one of your newest Fastpass Facts hosts. I'd like to thank everyone at Fastpass Facts for having me on the team and welcoming me into the family with open arms. I look forward to doing a lot more stuff here. But if you'd like to keep up with me, you can follow me on Twitter at WillPowerEngle, or you could go to my YouTube channel, Will Engel, to check out my podcast. That's all for today, but we'll see you next time here on Fastpass Facts.